Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Israeli forces kill senior terror operatives in Judea and Samaria while capturing suspects in connection to last week's double bus stop bombing attacks. Meanwhile, Israeli ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, revealing the truth about the Nakba that the world continues to ignore. And finally, this year's most incredible immigrants to Israel celebrated at an annual Nefesh B'nefesh ceremony. A number of potentially devastating terror attacks prevented overnight as the IDF neutralizing over half a dozen Palestinian terror group militants across Judea and Samaria. In a pre-dawn raid on the northern Samaria city of Jenin, IDF forces and Palestinian militants entering into a firefight, resulting with the killing of 2 senior Palestinian terrorist militants and the arrest of 5 suspects. The crackdown reportedly preempting an immediate terror threat, with the raid targeting wanted militants suspected of involvement in planning attacks, including the detonation of a car bomb against Israelis. Specific targets including Hamas operative Abu Hirtzula as well, who was released from Israeli prison several months ago, but the troops coming under live fire and thrown explosives, and Hirtzula escaping capture. That said, Hirtzula reportedly turning himself into the Palestinian Authority after he and his brother were injured in the raid. Then later, the 2 killed militants identified as Palestinian Islamic Jihad leader Mohammed Ayman al-Sadi and Naim Zubaydi, a senior member of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, which is the terror group associated with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah party. Both al-Sadi and Zubaydi connected to a number of shooting attacks against Israelis, and following the raid, IDF forces locating and confiscating at least 3 M16 rifles. No IDF injuries were reported. Now, meantime, in a separate operation Wednesday night, the IDF detaining a number of East Jerusalem residents suspected of involvement in the double bus stop bombings in the capital last week, which resulted in the injury of some 25 civilians and the murder of 2, 16-year-old student Arya Shupak and 50-year-old Tadisa Tashuma. In the wake of the devastating and coordinated bombing attack, security forces saying they conducted massive manhunts for the perpetrators. But it wasn't until 12 days after the attack that the suspects, residents of the Shuafat refugee camp in Jerusalem, were discovered. And in fact, it was their plans to attempt another terror attack that led the troops to their doorstep. Moving on, Palestinian terror groups preparing for attack not just in Judea and Samaria, but from the south in the Gaza Strip, and the United Nations once again shockingly implicated in their plans. November 29 marking the UN's International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. The UN reaffirming its support for the Palestinians, as well as in the two-state solution, seemingly based on the 1967 Green Line. But the Palestinian militant groups proving repeatedly that they have a very different agenda. In Gaza, UNRWA, the UN agency created for the Palestinians, once again finding that it's been hijacked by terrorists. The organization saying on Wednesday that it discovered a man-made cavity underneath one of its schools in Gaza, which was, quote, in serious violation of the agency's neutrality and a breach of international law. Moreover, it exposes children and agency staff to significant security and safety risks, end quote. This as the cavity designed to connect to Hamas's network of terror tunnels, which are used to move and hide militants and weapons, including rockets and launchers all across the Gaza Strip. This is hardly a one-off occurrence, however, with Israel long accusing Hamas of hiding weapons and terror infrastructure in and around schools, ambulances, hospitals, and residential buildings. And both tunnels and weapons have been found at UNRWA schools in the past, including during the fighting between Israel and Gaza in May 2021, during Operation Protective Edge in 2014, and independently by UNRWA in 2020 and 2017. And now with the latest updates on security, Lieutenant Colonel Reserves Maurice Hirsch, Director of Legal Strategies with Palestinian Media Watch, international legal expert, and former chief military prosecutor for Judea and Samaria. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, between breaking the wave and the recent killing of Ayman al-Sadi and Naim Zubaydi, how has the operational capabilities of Islamic Jihad and the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade been affected?
I think that what we're seeing really in Jenin and also in the northern area of Judea and Samaria, particularly in Nakba, Shem as well, is a joining of forces between the Palestinian Islamic Jihad on the one hand and the forces of the PLO, Fatah, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade. These are all incidents which are not necessarily new from this round of terror. We saw them also in the terror war from 2005, where the terrorist groups got over individual differences in order to forward the goal of promoting terrorism. What we're also seeing, and it was something that was mentioned by the IDF Chief of Staff just a few weeks ago, was the increasing involvement of Iran in what's going on in Judea and Samaria. What he's really talking about is Iranian forces actively supporting and promoting terrorism through their proxies, through Palestinian Islamic Jihad. That was the arrest of Bassam el-Sadi that we saw at the beginning of August. And this is the development of a new phase of terrorism and of Palestinian terrorism, heavily supported by Iran, who's now really calling the shots as the Palestinian Authority shows its ambivalence to any type of terror and really its own promotion of terror fitting into that general plan.
All right, well, in the meantime, should we expect some sort of retaliation from the Islamic Jihad as well? You know, they tend to fire rockets at Israel whenever their senior members are killed.
I think Islamic Jihad isn't something that they wait for us in order to kill terrorists, in order for them to respond. They are constantly trying to develop new ways to carry out terror attacks and new terror attacks all the time. That is their sole purpose. Palestinian Islamic Jihad has no leadership roles as part of their platform. They're purely a terrorist organization designed to murder Jews and exterminate Israel. That's just their daily goal, to place the emphasis on a result of what Israel did is something which I think is not necessarily seeing the picture correctly.
All right, now, the biggest issue recently seems not to come from organized terror groups, however, but rather lone actors with permits to work in Israel. Is it in Israel's interest, in your opinion, to cut down on work permits in the interest of security, or actually to raise the number of permits in a grassroots effort to create some sort of relations and economic alternatives to becoming a martyr for the sake of pay for slay through the Palestinian Authority's terrorist salaries?
Well, I think yesterday we saw, or the terrorist attack last week in Ariel, we saw a specific example of this, of the terrorist family saying that, well, he needed the money in order to support his family. His father had died, I think, when he was young, and he was supporting his family. And so now he would be able to support them for the rest of his life. This is something which, again, isn't necessarily connected to work permits or not. There's generally a lesser amount of people involved in terrorism if they have work permits. Obviously, there are exceptions to that rule, but I don't think that's something which is necessarily collected. I think it needs to be part of a wider plan and a discussion of how many permits are allowed for Palestinian workers to come into Israel, definitely from the Gaza Strip and also similarly from Judea and Samaria. It's something which needs to be taken into account at the moment. Just to give an idea, there are some 160,000 work permits that are active and mostly used at the moment. This is a huge amount of Palestinians that are in Israel every single day, and something which we don't necessarily see bringing on active terrorism. What it has to be then understood is that the cost for terrorism of a family member has wider implications than just that one person either going to prison or dying. And that's something which we've also seen implemented recently, and something which I think should be very much of the leverage that's used in order to promote the fight against terrorism.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel Hirsch, thank you so much again for joining us.
Thanks, Adam.
Moving on, the Israeli Air Force now publishing details and footage of its incredible joint aerial exercises with the United States, simulating strikes against nuclear targets in Iran. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz reporting.
The drills took place over Israel and the Mediterranean Sea. Taking part were 4 Israeli F-35 fighters, accompanied by 4 American F-15s. A U.S. fueling aircraft refueled several Israeli F-15s as well. The Israeli pilots welcomed the Americans to Israeli airspace.
Unit 25, we have visual contact with you. Permission to approach formation. Unit 25, welcome to Israel. This is the Israeli Air Force. Thank you for fulfilling our plans. We look forward to further cooperation.
Inmate 75.
The exercise planned for a number of operational scenarios, including a strike on Iranian nuclear facilities or against Iranian terror proxies in the region. The exercise tested the ability to share gathered intelligence and outline targets. It's all part of the strategic cooperation resulting from the need to counter Iran. The joint drill was coordinated in Washington, where IDF Chief of Staff Aviv Kochavi met with his counterparts in the Pentagon last week. Kochavi told the Americans that the two militaries must coordinate offensive action to counter Iranian aggression. After watching the drill from the Army Command Center, Prime Minister Lapid said Israel has partners in the sky and on the ground. We also have the ability to act on our own to defend the state of Israel.
Back in Jerusalem now, Prime Minister-designate Benjamin Netanyahu is still working day in and day out to finalize his coalition appointments, but simultaneously Netanyahu is coming under increasingly tough pressure from the outgoing government leaders. Now armed with a 2-week extension to continue his coalition negotiations, Prime Minister-elect Netanyahu planning a so-called legislative blitz to get his appointments approved. In line with his coalition partners' demands, Netanyahu will press his incoming bloc to quickly replace the current Knesset Speaker in order to present and pass the controversial override bill, which would enable his government to overrule high court decisions. And with that, the incoming government would be empowered to appoint Shas Chief Aryeh Deri as a minister, despite previous corruption convictions. It would then also allow the country's security to be placed, at least in part, under the mandate of Otzma Yehudit's Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is slated to become the new National Security Minister, a newly created position with the Public Security Ministry's current authority, as well as power over various military units in Judea and Samaria. In light of what critics are calling an acquiescence to fringe and nationalist elements, however, outgoing government officials are pressing Netanyahu's Likud party to publish the details of its coalition negotiations. Yesh Atid faction head MK Boaz Toporowski, for example, writing in a letter to the Likud that the law stipulates all agreements must be handed to the Knesset secretary within 3 days of signing, and that the Likud violated this law by publishing the Otzma Yehudit agreements after 4 days, and by still withholding details from the other agreements. The Likud, on the other hand, accusing Toporowski of hypocrisy and a double standard, saying the outgoing government did no such thing when it was their turn to do so, and that any details published were so far released to promote transparency, but that no deals have been finalized to begin with. Israel now displaying an exhibit at the United Nations depicting the expulsion of Jews from Middle Eastern countries following the establishment of the Jewish state in 1948, and Israel's UN ambassador Gilad Erdan is calling these Jewish refugees the real Nakba. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz reports.
Palestinians have long used the Arabic term Nakba, or catastrophe, to describe Israel's creation and the resulting displacement of some 700,000 Palestinian Arabs during the war in 1947 and 8. A war initiated by the Arab nations in an attempt to destroy the newly declared Jewish state. Israeli UN Ambassador Gilad Erdan says it was Jewish refugees who suffered the real Nakba.
מאז תוכנית החלוקה ב-1947, האו"ם מספר סיפור שקרי לחלוטין על מה שקרה בינינו לבין הפלסטינים. יש פה נרטיב שקרי של נקבה ושל פליטים פלסטינים, ומטילים פה באו"ם את כל האשמה על ישראל. אז אחרי מאבק ממושך הצלחנו להציב כאן סוף סוף תערוכה שמראה את האמת. האמת מאחורי הסיפור האמיתי של הנקבה, והנקבה שהייתה באמת היא הנקבה היהודית של מאות אלפים, כמעט 1 מיליון יהודים שגורשו מארצות ערב ומאיראן, שהיה להם שם רכוש ותרבות ומסורת ומשפחות. עכשיו באו"ם אנחנו נאבק על האמת הזאת ונראה לכולם מה באמת קרה לאחר 1947, לאחר תוכנית החלוקה של כ"ט בנובמבר.
The exhibit marks the 75th anniversary of the UN resolution favoring Israel's creation. Following that vote, almost 1 million Jews were expelled from Arab countries and Iran. The vast majority of Jewish refugees were absorbed into Israel, while the United Nations and Arab countries forced Palestinian refugees to remain in refugee camps.
Netflix today began streaming a controversial anti-Israel film made in Jordan, Farhad, depicting allegedly true atrocities committed by Israeli soldiers in cold blood against Palestinians during the 1948 War of Israel's independence, including the brutal execution of civilians, even a baby. Joining me with more is film critic and lecturer Ron Fogel. Ron, thank you very much for being with us. Now, first off, Netflix is hosting this film which claims to be based on true events, and obviously, if true, it would be a horrific story. But who's checking the veracity of such claims?
That's the big problem that I have with the film, that it's allegedly based on true facts. But if you hear the film director, she says it's more of a hearsay. It's stories that she heard from her father and from her grandparents about this supposed to be kid that was locked in a basement, and he looked through the windows and he saw Israeli soldiers killing Palestinian babies. So we don't know if it's based on true stories. Nobody in Netflix bothered to check the historic accuracy. Now I'll tell you, for me as a film critic and a lecturer, I don't have trouble with historic accuracy because filmmakers have historic freedom. In Tarantino's film Glorious Bastards, the Jews kill Hitler, and in the movie JFK by Oliver Stone, the CIA and the FBI assassin Kennedy, which we know it's not absolutely true. And this Jordanian director can do what she wants and portray whatever she wants on film, and Netflix can purchase this film and distribute it to all 200 million,
but to say that it's true,
subscribers. But the problem is when you try that it's a false narrative, and if you show it to so many people, it can hurt and damage our country, and that's why the outrage of people in Israel want to unsubscribe to Netflix.
Right. I mean, so exactly. I mean, of course, and you mentioned Inglourious Bastards is a perfect example. Of course, filmmakers have every right to take artistic liberties with history, but if you pass it off as true is when you start to get into issues. And many Palestinian films have been made for propaganda in the past. Investigations showing that some 90% of the Palestinian-made films on Netflix alone are directed by ardent BDS supporters. So if, in fact, the film is shown to be libelous, how culpable is Netflix for producing and disseminating it?
I tell you the truth, I'm sure, I think that they're interested in incomes and not historical accuracy. They're a large corporation, an international company. By the way, they like the provocation that the film made because now many, probably more subscribers will want to see it. So they like what's happening to draw the fire, but that's a problem. We in Israel can talk to Netflix, ask them to try to check these things when you have this problematic issue to show on the movie screen. Everybody in Israel doesn't have to watch. There is a problem. It was screened yesterday in a theater in Jaffa. When you try to screen it in places that get money from the government, that's an issue and that's a problem. Which reminds me, by the way, what happened in 2005 with the movie Paradise Now. Paradise Now was a Palestinian film that was nominated for the Oscars. It got in the 5 last movies that were nominated. And it was an ABC for a suicide bomber. How you get the bomb, how you shave, how you get the greetings as a shaheed, how you come to Tel Aviv with an aid, and then in the end, how you bomb yourself in a bus. Yes, purchase the film, and in the last minute, they took it out of their screenings because there was an outrage in Israel. But it was shown in cinematheques around Israel, and we know that these things happen. But when you have a false narrative in these films, like this Jordanian film, whose Jordanian nomination for the Oscar, by the way, the problem is that just this one sentence that says in the beginning, based on true facts. Netflix, if they want to be honest and fair, I don't believe that they're interested in being honest and fair.
They should remove that.
Could add that it's not actually proven that it's based on historical accuracy.
All right. Ron Fogel, thank you so much again for joining us.
Bye-bye. See you.
In the past 2.5 years, some 105,000 people have made Aliyah or immigrated to Israel, an historic record from the past 2 decades. And many have not only immigrated to Israel, but they're thriving here. So one organization dedicated to Aliyah, Nefesh B'nefesh, is honoring these olim. And joining us now with more is ILTV's Lidar Gavailazi. Lidar, you were at the award ceremony. What can you tell us?
Hey, Aaron. So this week we had the chance to go to Jerusalem to the Sylvan Adams Nefesh B'nefesh Bonei Zion Prize Award Ceremony. It's a truly prestigious prize that they give out every year. This is the 4th year that they're awarding the prize to olim, or immigrants, who have had a tremendous impact on the state of Israel and Israeli society. We were there, we got to go behind the scenes, talk to the winners of the prize, talk to Rabbi Yeshua Fass and Tony Gelbert, the founders of Nefesh B'nefesh. We got to talk to the Minister of Absorption and Aliyah here in Israel. It was a really exciting night. Let's take a look. This year's honorees include distinguished olim across all fields of Israeli society. Professor Morris Hartstein, founding director of Operation Ethiopia, is awarded the prize in the field of global impact.
I work in Ethiopia, and our primary goal, we provide primary eye care to both the Jewish community there and neighboring villages with non-Jews. We provide medications, glasses. We also perform high-volume cataract surgery, hundreds of cataracts in a week, and then we also train Ethiopian doctors both in Ethiopia and back here in Israel.
Professor Hartstein is a world-renowned ophthalmic plastic surgeon. In 2014, at the request of his children, his family of 6 went to volunteer in the Jewish community of Gondar, Ethiopia. Professor Hartstein, along with his wife and 4 children, made Aliyah from Missouri in 2004.
We came to Israel 18 years ago for a 1-year sabbatical, and we stayed a 2nd year and a 3rd year, and then to develop a practice in Israel and have kids serving in the army, but then to develop this whole other aspect of working in Africa for the last 8 years is really amazing. And then the ultimate is to, get this award from Nefesh B'nefesh is just really the ultimate honor, and I'm super excited about it.
Also at the ceremony, Minister of Aliyah and Integration Pnina Tamano-Shate, receiving an award of special recognition for her work.
אני חושבת שקיבלתי את התיק הכי משמעותי בממשלת ישראל, עם הלב והנשמה של עם ישראל. וזה לא נושא שעוזבים אותו, זה נושא שנושמים אותו. בטח אני כמי שעלתה לארץ, טוני יכול להעיד בעצמו כמי שעלה גם הוא לארץ. ואנחנו נמשיך לעשות כל שביכולתנו, מכל פוזיציה, כדי לקלוט את העולים בצורה שהיא מחבקת ואוהבת. כי בסוף אנחנו הדור שזכה לחיות כאן, ויש לנו חובה, לא משנה מאיפה ומאיזה פוזיציה, לפעול אחד למען השני, כי כל ישראל ערבים זה לזה.
Indeed, Nefesh B'nefesh has been an integral part of this endeavor, bringing over 75,000 olim to the state of Israel since its founding. And tonight's award provides the opportunity to showcase some of their remarkable contributions.
It is remarkably inspiring. First of all, it's humbling and inspiring just to be in a position to give prizes to somebody else. It's really nice. It's a great feeling. But every year we get hundreds of applications, and the committee has to sift through them all and decide how we create the makeup of the prize winners and the recipients. And 8 years in, the applications still flow. 8 years in, the stories are as inspiring. And just huddling with the recipients just a half an hour ago, just the camaraderie is remarkable, the shared enthusiasm and shared respect is very noteworthy.
This year, the organization is marking its 20th anniversary.
Just celebrating 20 years, now we're shifting into MBN 2.0. And it's not just facilitative and integrative, but it's to celebrate and advocate and educate about Zionism, and very much centralized in our new campus in Jerusalem, that we're using it as almost a blank canvas, that we're experimenting and expressing all these different elements of modern-day Zionism and modern-day Aliyah.
The Sylvan Adams Nefesh B'nefesh Bonei Tzion Prize shows that you can make Aliyah to Israel and truly thrive.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around the country tonight, with lows this evening averaging 10 degrees Celsius or 50 Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, alongside sunny skies, we see top temperatures of 22 Celsius or 72 degrees Fahrenheit. And finally, on Saturday, we can expect some more cloudy skies with temperatures remaining in the mid-20s. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all of your devices, check out our ILTV channels on YouTube, Facebook, and Telegram, and subscribe to our ILTV newsletter. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.